welcome to this Friday, the 14th of January, and of course, it is wonderful to have your company once again today. And moving on, we'd like to welcome you all to the show. And as we mentioned before, that today we will be looking at the coverage of the National Cabinet, and also we will then be going on to the Daily India Report. With that, let's begin today's show with that National Cabinet meeting report.
We have to be very clear about our objectives. This is a key point of discussion we had with Premiers and Chief Ministers today. What is it that all of these measures are designed to achieve? That was set out very clearly in the National Plan. That objective in this phase of dealing with the pandemic is to minimise serious illness, hospitalisations and fatalities, and to maintain those baseline restrictions to support that goal. So the idea that our measures as governments across the country, Commonwealth and at a state and territory level, is to prevent everyone in the country from being infected with the virus, that is not the objective. That is not a realistic objective. It's not a practical objective. Nowhere in the world are they trying to achieve that virtually. And that is not something that we are trying to achieve. What we are trying to achieve is to ensure that we can keep our hospitals under the least pressure that can possibly be put on them, that we can maintain the strength of our hospitals through this pandemic. And we recognise that, of course, our hospitals and our health systems are under significant strain at present. That is unavoidable when you have a pandemic operating at this scale with this latest variant of the virus. The pressures on the hospital system is things that we have been working to ensure that we can cope with for a very long time. And hospitals, again, despite the pressures are there, and I thank all the staff who are working in those hospitals who are under significant strain. But we are, at this stage, continuing to manage the number of cases coming into hospitals within those tolerances. It's not easy. It's putting a lot of pressure on people, but it is being achieved, and that remains a very important objective for all of us as we continue to manage this pandemic. The other thing we're trying to do at exactly the same time is keeping our economy functioning. Now, this is a closed system. It's a finite system. As we've progressed with the Omicron variant, which, remember, has two key characteristics. The first one is it's highly transmissible, and the second one is it's less severe. Now, both of these facts, particularly the latter one, it wasn't till several weeks ago that was able to be confirmed. And so the suggestion that somehow restrictions may have been lessened earlier when we had no clear evidence at that time that the severity was less would have been a very, very unwise decision. And that's not the decision we took. Once we became aware that the severity was less, then that has enabled us to move to ensure we can relax some of the restrictions in critical workforces. And so this is a constant daily process of balancing the need to keep people at work and to protect our hospitals. And that's why it changes almost daily, because this balance changes daily. We will go through a period where this peaks, and then we'll be into another phase about how we're managing it from there on. And different states and territories will enter those peaks at different times, but they will enter that peak, and they all understand that. Some sooner than others. It's possible that New South Wales may have already passed it, but we'll see as the weeks unfold over the next little while. So the key point we wanted to stress today, and that I want to stress today, is this is a constantly moving target. We know what we have to hit: keep our hospitals going, keeping our health system strong, and keeping as many people at work. The less restrictions you put on people to get them at work, the more pressure that can potentially put on your hospital system. And vice versa. The more you try to protect your hospital system, the more people you're taking out of work, which disrupts supply chains. So this is a very delicate balance that needs to be constantly recalibrated. And so today, I think, was another very good discussion in getting those trade-offs right and making sure we get those trade-offs in place. The workforce implications was a critical discussion today, and I'll make some further announcements about what was agreed. but just let me remind people about the decisions that we've already taken. The redefinition of close contacts is still only quite recent, and through the meetings of the National Coordinating Mechanism led by Joe Buffoni, with the support oversight Minister of Karen Andrews, we are already getting feedback that those measures, particularly in the supermarket distribution systems, are already having a positive impact. But we need to go further. The close contact rule, remember, is that you're a close contact if you have someone in your own accommodation setting that has the virus. Okay? That's when you're a close contact. You're not a close contact because you happened to be here today and one of you might have COVID. You're not a close contact if you've gone to a bar or to a restaurant or another venue and there happened to be a case there. This notion of exposure sites, which means you're a close contact, that's Delta. That's in the past. Close contact is if you're living with someone in an accommodation-type environment and you're in that situation for that protracted time. That's if you're a close contact. And of course, the other one is you're symptomatic. And if you're symptomatic or you're a close contact, you should get tested. And you go to the testing centre and they'll either give you a rapid antigen test or they will give you, and all free, a PCR test, depending what is necessary in both of those cases. Now, the biggest armoury we have to fight the virus is the vaccination. And yesterday, as General Fruin will outline, we had the best day on dose administration since I think it was the 5th of October. We had 349,000 doses administered yesterday. Now, of those, 254,112 were boosters, and that's tremendous. That is absolutely tremendous. We had, in total now, with 5 to 11-year-olds, we have got 141,587 doses admitted to children aged 5 to 11. Now that's in 3 days over 6% of that population, and those doses continue to roll out, and there's 1.1 million children's dose vaccines on shelves, in fridges, in those more than 6,000 points of presence where people can access those vaccines. Could I also remind parents with children in the secondary school age to go and get theirs. So the 12 to 15-year-olds, we've already passed the 80% first dose for that group. We need to get to the second dose. We're over 75%, so we're closing in on it. So a reminder, and it's not just 5 to 11-year-olds that are on the back-to-school list. Make sure for the 12 to 15s, if they haven't had their second dose, to go and get those as well. I also want to note that reinfection on Omicron can occur. So all this nonsense about COVID parties, it's ridiculous. Okay? Reinfection can occur with Omicron. And so if you think you can go out there, get the virus and get it over with, that's not how it works. That's not how the virus is writing the rules. So continue to take the precautions, continue to exercise common sense, continue to be responsible in managing your own health and the baseline measures that are in place to support you and the health of others. Today we agreed the concessional access to rapid antigen tests, which will commence on the 24th of January after discussions with the Pharmacy Guild, and that will be done on a 50-50 basis. The pharmacies will source those supplies and you'll be able to get it along the terms that I announced last week, and I thank the states and territories to their agreement on that. That will be funded 50-50 under the COVID Health Agreement, Partnership Agreement. So that is, just to be clear again, 10 tests in total over 3 months with a maximum of 5 a month. And you go to the pharmacy, you present your relevant concession card, which we have announced before, and they can process that and provide you with that test from the 24th of January. Obviously, supplies are limited, just as they are for the rest of the community, and that's those arrangements. We also discussed the key priorities for rapid antigen tests, particularly those provided publicly, and they are, firstly, the health and aged care workforce. Commonwealth, of course, looks after aged care, and the states and territories looked after the health workforce. And for symptomatic and close contacts, which is provided through the state testing centres, And thirdly, for vulnerable communities. So that's particularly Indigenous communities. And a good note there, just like 12 to 15-year-olds, our double dose vaccination rate for Indigenous communities has now gone over 75%. Our first dose has also crested 80%. And that's a tremendous result in Indigenous communities, and I want to thank particularly all of those in those Indigenous communities and Indigenous leaders for the great work they've been doing right across the country. To further ease the pressure on supply chains, we extended the easing of restrictions for close contacts. So that's the one which enables someone who may be a close contact, they get a negative RAT test and go straight back to work. They don't have to isolate for that period, they just go straight back to work. The most immediate extension of that is to all transport, freight and logistics employees, so not just those directly involved in food distribution, but all in the transport, freight and logistics sector, and that also will include those who work at service stations to ensure that they continue to be staffed and people can get access to those services. We will also be extending it to, if it hasn't already been done, and in many cases it has, it will cover all health, welfare, care and support, emergency services, which includes law enforcement, correctional services, energy, resources and water and waste management, food, beverage and other critical goods supply, so that's the food distribution system and production system, I'm not talking about hospitality there, telecommunications, data, broadcasting and media. And it will also extend to education and childcare, but I'll address that separately now. Well, before I do that, let me note that the Commonwealth has already lifted the 20-hour rule on student visa holders. That decision's already been taken. That was taken yesterday, after the meetings we had yesterday. So students will have no hour restrictions on them being able to be available for work in Australia if they're already here. I also note that students can return. That's been in place for some time now. Backpackers can also come to Australia now under those work and holiday visas. So they're able to enter the country, both of which, students and backpackers, if they are double vaccinated. And that is a necessary condition for entry into Australia. But moving back to schools, one of the most important ways of ensuring that our workforce is not depleted, and we heard today from the Treasury Secretary that we could be looking at an up to 10% absenteeism from our workforce at any one time at its peak. That's 10% of your workforce taken out by COVID. Now, that is the impact of a highly contagious infection and virus. And that is going to have an inevitable impact on your workforce, and then that has to be managed. If schools don't open, then that can add an additional 5% to the absenteeism in the workforce. So it is absolutely essential for schools to go back safely and to remain safely open if we are not to see any further exacerbation of the workforce challenges we're currently facing. So schools open means shops open. Schools open means hospitals are open. It means aged care facilities are open. It means essential services and groceries are on the shelves. That's what schools opens mean, and it's very important they go back. And the health advice is they can go back, and the Chief Medical Officer may make further comments on that. We agreed some key principles today, and they are, and next week the detailed operational plans will come back, which will deal with the role of surveillance testing, with rapid antigen tests where that's deemed necessary. It'll deal with how that applies to staff in particular. It'll deal with mask wearing, and those arrangements are being worked through by the states and territories now. But the first principle is that childcare and schools are essential and should be first to open and last to close wherever possible, with face-to-face learning prioritised. Now, we note in particular in South Australia and in Queensland, they have delayed the full reopening of schools by 2 weeks. That is on the basis of the estimated peak of the virus in those states, and to align those opening times around that issue. So there are some specific medical reasons while they are doing that in those 2 states, which is recognised and understood by the other states and territories. But we note that in both of those cases, those states will have the ability for children of essential workers, which covers all of those groups I mentioned before, to be able to send their kids to school on that day. So they are still addressing the key workforce need, and we hope they'll be getting as best a possible education for the children of those essential workers when they go back. The baseline public health measures continue to apply. That no vulnerable child or child of an essential worker is turned away. That responses must be proportionate and health risk-based. That childcare services and schools are equipped to respond on the basis of public health advice with support from public health authorities where required, and the wellbeing of children and education staff to be supported. So supporting essential workers in education and childcare will be important, and the Commonwealth and the states are working together to have 50-50 funding arrangements in place to ensure that is put in place, certainly by the time school comes back, and we'll have a bit more to say about that next week, not unlike how last week we talked about concessional access. We're able to detail those plans over the course of this week and bring them into agreement now. So a fairly busy day with the focus very much on keeping Australians at work and keeping Australians out of hospital. We keep achieving that as best as we possibly can. That enables us to push through. That is done through a combination of getting people vaccinated, ensuring we continue to have sensible precautions in place and those public health social measures in place, whether they be in schools, workplaces or anywhere else, and that can limit, but the goal is not to stop everyone in the country getting COVID. The goal is to protect our hospitals and keep our society and economy functioning as we ride this latest wave of Omicron.
I just wanted to remind people in the Fraser Coast Regional Council, Gympie Local Government Area and North Burnett Regional Council that assistance is available, and South Burnett Local Government Areas. And you can call for assistance the Community Recovery Hotline on 1800 173 349. We've already had 639 calls, and as of 2 p.m. yesterday, $80,280 has been paid out to more than 400 people. I've also written to the Prime Minister today seeking Category D assistance. Now, this happens very quickly. There's absolute cooperation when it comes to the federal and state government getting assistance out the door. So this is assistance for primary producers and small business. You may recall I mentioned when I was up there the other day that small businesses were telling me that they needed support pretty quickly. A lot of them had lost stock. So this will go towards helping that replacement of stock as well as their clean-up. So we've written asking for the impacts for severe impacts for crop and livestock losses. So we're asking for around $26 million in assistance there, so that'll cover livestock loss, crops. This is just the initial assessments as well. We expect there to be more. And in Maryborough, I'm advised that there's 80 homes impacted and 70 small businesses. So we'll be making sure that we get more information out to people. I can also advise that the Deputy Premier and Paul de Jersey will be on the ground on Monday, so they'll be travelling across the region and visiting some of those towns that were isolated as well that I wasn't able to get to when I went to Maryborough. So the community recovery is well underway, and I thank the Reconstruction Authority for going out there and doing those assessments pretty quickly. And like I said to you, as they get to go to more and more people's properties, as the flooding recedes, they'll be able to do more assessments. So just wanted to make sure that everyone in those regions is feeling supported, and if you do need any help, then don't forget to that lifeline is available as well if anyone's experiencing any ongoing trauma or feeling upset as to what's happened. Please ring those hotlines and people will be there to assist you. I'll hand over to the Chief Health Officer.
So sadly, we have 3 deaths to report today, 2 people in their 70s and 1 in their 60s. None were vaccinated. Our thoughts are with their families and loved ones today. And out of respect to their families, we will not be giving any further details about these patients. In terms of the hospital situation, we now have a total of 589 people in hospital requiring treatment. That includes 41 patients in hospital in intensive care. And I'll say that again because the way we've been reporting it previously was causing a bit of confusion. So we now have 589 people in hospital in total today. That includes 41 patients in intensive care, and of those 41 patients in intensive care, 15 of them were ventilated. So the 589 figure is up from 586 yesterday, and the figure of 41 in intensive care is up from 26 yesterday. So there's a steady increase in the number of patients in hospitals, not an explosive increase, a steady increase. It's across Queensland. The increases are across Queensland in all regions. Seems to be particular growth in Brisbane south of the river. That's where most of the growth is occurring at the moment, but not explosive growth, but steady growth across the state. Thank you very much. I'll now hand over to the Health Minister.
So I just want to thank all of those people who are registering their positive tests with their rapid antigen. I do want to remind people, I know when you get that first positive result, you might be a bit anxious. You know, there's plenty of information on the website and to follow that advice, to keep track of your symptoms. And of course, you know, just look after your health and those in your family. I do remind people that as other people become positive in the household, which is highly likely to happen, make sure you are also registering their positive tests as well, so we can get an accurate idea of how many cases there are out there, and of course to support you as you go through dealing with COVID. I want to say I think it's great our 5 to 11-year-old vaccination rates. In the first 3 days, we have had 5.96% of all 5 to 11-year-olds in Queensland vaccinated, so almost 6% in just 3 days. And we know that number's going to grow as our pharmacies and GPs are able to come online as they get the vaccine supply delivered to them. And we've got 45,267 young people 5 to 11 booked in for appointments from today forward at our state clinics. So that is great. Keep coming forward. I do want to say that our 12 to 15-year-olds are not at the same high rate as our adult population of 16 plus. So if you haven't got your teenager vaccinated or they are eligible for their second boost, and it might have been you delayed it because of the Christmas break, please come and get that vaccination as soon as they're eligible. And if you haven't got vaccinated yet, please do. Of course, bring the whole family. You know, all of the children can come in and get vaccinated, and the parents can get their booster at the same time if they're all eligible. We have secured now 637 private beds already, and we are already moving some of our public patients into the private system, and I know that's creating capacity in our public hospitals, which they're very grateful for as we move towards a greater surge. For those who do have symptoms, who are unsure whether they have COVID, they're not able to get a rapid antigen test, of course they still can come forward and line up and get a PCR test. Again, please just be respectful to all of our health workers, particularly those working in ICU and COVID wards at the moment. Thank you for the tremendous work you're doing, but we also know any person who walks into a hospital could be positive or become positive while they are there, and I just want to thank all of our amazing health workers and frontline workers who are doing such a great job.
And there we are. We'll leave that report there because as we have seen from those reports, that the main thing, the key thing is that, you know, even with all the things happening out there, the message is you still need to take care, you still exercise care, still wear the mask, do your bit. You do your bit and, of course, keep moving forward. Many people there are saying, you know, that we want to get on with our lives. But I think from the Prime Minister's things, you know, taking away that 20-hour requirement for students to work, So that makes good sense, because while we need, people to work, and there's a shortage of workers, and we have the students here, why impose that 20-hour rule? And of course, students and seasonal workers are allowed to come in to fill in those positions. That is great news. So I think that's a bit of a welcome news in there. Well, right now, moving on, let's take it a very quick look at, before we go to our daily India report, is where are we with this COVID? How is it faring apart from these news conferences?
It's been a stressful summer for Lisa Caponio.
Ciao mamma, come va? Tutto bene oggi?
Lisa's mother lives in a private aged care home in southeast Melbourne. Katerina, who has dementia, has endured 2 lockdowns since the start of December, with 10 days entirely confined to her room because of COVID outbreaks.
Day one was horrific. Something like about 15 phone calls I received. She calls to say, please explain what's happened, and she's deteriorating. Her voice is weakening.
Princeton View Aged Care says it followed directives from the Victorian Health Department as required during the outbreaks. Lisa Caponio is happy with the care her mum receives, but she's worried about ongoing lockdowns now Omicron is sweeping the country.
Mum's been triple vaccinated. The home that she's in has done an amazing job to keep them safe. But going forward, this is just not sustainable, because these outbreaks are going to continue to happen.
In December, there were 36 aged care homes across the country grappling with COVID-19 outbreaks. That number escalated over the Christmas-New Year period, and by last week there were almost 500 homes with active outbreaks.
We are seeing an astronomic level of aged care COVID outbreaks. So we think that by the end of this week, we'll probably be well over a third, getting towards half of all aged care homes in Australia that will have been experiencing an outbreak.
According to the latest national figures, more than 1,300 aged care residents have COVID, along with more than 1,800 staff. 12 residents have died of COVID so far this year. Last year, 227 died.
It feels a bit like, we're a Groundhog Day, or that we're just repeating the same mistakes that we've done before.
While the government says it's committed to protecting senior Australians, the opposition argues the pandemic has revealed underlying systemic issues in the sector.
We have had 8 years of funding cuts and complete neglect of our aged care system. We've had a Royal Commission which told...
Tragically, 3 people who lost their lives today, there are no reports of vaccination. So every Queenslander, and let me say this very clearly, every Queenslander has had the opportunity to get a vaccine. There has been misinformation that has been circulating on social media, and let me make it very clear. The vaccination will help prevent serious disease, and the booster is an added layer. So it is not too late if you are out there and you are unvaccinated to go and get the vaccine. Please go and talk to a trusted health professional if you have any concerns whatsoever. I'm hearing reports that some people are unvaccinated and doing a rat test every day. Now, that's not going to stop you from getting COVID. So please go and speak to a health professional, go and get that direct advice and get vaccinated. And it's great to see that the vaccination rates are really climbing up across the state. But especially in our Indigenous communities, there has been a big drive to get people vaccinated, and we've had the likes of Jonathan Thurston, Steve Renouf, everyone out there encouraging people to get vaccinated. If you have not had that vaccine and people have gone door to door, I mean, I don't know what else we can do.
Are you aware of the food security concerns?
Sorry?
Are you aware of the food security concerns?
Look, I'll follow that up, but we have had, discussions at National Cabinet about making sure that supplies can get through, and that's why we've made some of those changes to that essential workforce. But if there are any particular concerns, we will deal with those issues of those particular communities.
With close contact issues amongst hospitality workers, and also you encouraging vulnerable communities to perhaps restrict their movements at the moment. We're hearing a lot of small businesses say the trade for them is like it was back in lockdown. Has there been any thought given to a support package for small, medium business during this time, in which it is just a big that you're saying, you want people...
No, what we've said very clearly is that we are concerned about the vulnerable people at the moment, because that's the impact that this wave will have. So if people are vaccinated, they're wearing their mask, and especially those who are boosted, they should be going out and living their lives and supporting local businesses. That's my message. So it's really interesting. In some pockets of Brisbane, I was driving last night, in some pockets of Brisbane there's a lot of cafes open, in some parts they're closed. These are individual decisions that business people will make, dependent on staff availability.
But no thought at the moment to any support?
No, there is no, because that was taken away at National Cabinet in terms of once we reach that 80%. Yeah.
Premier, did we drop to the bottom of the missing rapid antigen test? Minister Bailey took to Twitter again last night, still accusing the federal government of taking some 22,000 tests.
I might get the Health Minister. I haven't.
I know the Health Minister didn't know much about yesterday.
No, I haven't been advised of that.
Just on that, we've been told that the Feds have potentially seized orders for RAT tests from Queensland around QPS. Are you aware of that?
No, I'll follow that up, but that's a concern if that's happening. Yeah. Okay?
Dr. Gerard.
Thanks.
The deaths that are being reported in Queensland, are the majority of them happening at home or in hospitals or aged care?
It's a mixture of all of the above. So it's a mixture of all of the above. That's what I can say. We've had a handful in aged care. We've had some in hospital and a few at home as well. So no, it's a mixture.
Are you concerned that there are deaths happening at home, and is that a constraint on the health system?
Yes, it does concern us when there are deaths at home. From the few reports that I've been seeing, we're seeing reports of people having an illness for a short period and then sudden deaths, and we've reported about those earlier on. That's been reported elsewhere in Australia, around the world, where it's myocarditis, which I think I've referred to on a previous occasion. But we are certainly keeping a close eye on those, particularly when there are deaths. We investigate those particularly if there's anyone who's died at home.
Dr. Gerard, just on the questions that were put.
So they were, ladies and gentlemen, up to date on Australian Indian Radio. Well, right now, before we go to our daily India report, I'd like to bring to you a few of the little key news that people have been following. Number one, Novak Djokovic. Let's see what the federal government, whether they reached any decision or not.
There's never been a lead-up to the Australian Open quite like this. As Novak Djokovic practised on court this afternoon, his future at the tournament remained unclear. But just over an hour later, he was included in the draw as the #1 seed, meaning at least for now he'll be on court next week to defend his Australian Open title. That's unless the Federal Immigration Minister Alex Hawke uses his special powers to cancel Djokovic's visa for a second time.
We will be opening a can of worms if the Minister does go ahead and cancel again, because Djokovic, I think he would have to go back to court. The consequences of this are very serious, and who's to say what would happen then? So I think the circus has got to end.
The federal government says it's continuing to consider the issue.
I refer to Minister Hawke's most recent statement, and that position hasn't changed, and these are personal ministerial powers able to be exercised by Minister Hawke, and I don't propose to make any further comment at this time.
This has been a debacle yet again, a government sitting back, waiting till a problem becomes a crisis before it acts. This is an international embarrassment for Australia.
In yet another twist, video footage has emerged of the world #1 playing tennis in Spain in early January. That's despite claiming on entry documents that he hadn't travelled for 14 days prior to entering Australia. Djokovic blamed that on an administrative mistake by a member of his team.
People make mistakes all the time in their statements when they come into the country. So from a point of view of border control, what Djokovic has done is not...
I don't think that's a good enough excuse that people make mistakes on their cards. A person of his caliber and stature should know and should know better. Well, look, I do sympathise with him and for what's been happening, but of course, rules are rules and they really need to be followed as well. Talking of something else, how about cash and more cash? Here's the story.
Swarming on an alleged international crime ring.
Police! Search warrant! Open the door!
They found bundles of $10,000 in cash, neatly packed in shopping bags. 4 people have been arrested and charged over alleged money laundering.
At least 2 members of the syndicate are connected to Hong Kong syndicates. At least 1 member with organised Asian gangs in Sydney.
More than $3 million was seized from inside a unit, while almost $4.8 million was found in the boot of a car. 32-year-old Wan Tian is accused of being the mastermind of the enterprise.
The money had been through money scanning machines. There were money ledgers recovered by this organised crime syndicate. The money was being prepped for its next part of the journey.
Police believe that could be the Star Casino. Mr. Tian is banned from the premises, but detectives say he gambled there twice in recent months.
We're still under investigation with the forensic accountants and analysts with the New South Wales Crime Commission to establish whether any or all of these monies were headed to the casino to be laundered.
All 4 accused were refused bail. The Star says it would be inappropriate to comment as the matter is before the courts. Molly Gorman, ABC News, Sydney.
As the matter is before the court, and as I've mentioned before, money and more money, there's about 7.8 million in cash. Well, by the way, they're very neatly stacked, I must say. Right now, it's time for us to go to our daily India report.
Welcome to the Daily India Report, which brings you glimpses of the changing India. In our first story, a study has found that a booster shot of India's homemade Bharat Biotech's Covaxin is effective against the Omicron and Delta variants of COVID-19. India's indigenously developed COVID-19 vaccine, Covaxin, manufactured by Bharat Biotech, is found to be effective against Omicron and Delta variants. According to a study conducted at Emory University, a booster shot of Covaxin administered 6 months after getting 2 doses of the vaccine has been found to successfully neutralize both the Omicron and Delta variants of SARS-CoV-2. Bharat Biotech said the study conducted using a live virus neutralization assay showed the booster dose generated robust neutralizing antibody responses against both Omicron and Delta. The study results point out that 100% of test serum samples showed neutralization of the Delta variant and more than 90% of serum samples showed booster neutralization of the Omicron variant. Bharat Biotech says that this data adds to the body of evidence that the broad-spectrum mechanism of action of a whole virus inactivated COVID-19 vaccine like Covaxin is a viable option in the continuously evolving pandemic. Bharat Biotech said the neutralization activity of Covaxin-boosted sera was comparable to what has been observed in mRNA vaccine-boosted sera against the Omicron variant, with more than 90% of all individuals boosted with Covaxin showing neutralizing antibodies. Bharat Biotech officials claimed that, quote, data from this preliminary analysis show individuals receiving a booster dose of Covaxin have a significant immune response to both the Omicron and Delta variants, and it has the potential to reduce disease severity and hospitalizations, end quote. India has developed a strong startup ecosystem under the leadership of Prime Minister Narendra Modi. We have a special interview of one of the successful startups in the dairy farming sector.
We are a direct-to-home consumer tech brand delivering natural food essentials directly from the farmer to the doorstep of the customer. We operate in 13 cities across 11 states of the country, spanning a supply chain that has thousands of kilometers and through all the four corners of the country. Milk is our entry or the hook into every household that we deliver, and we deliver from farmers to customers within 24 to 36 hours of milking. We have a very strong tech-driven supply chain thinking, which allows us to have full control over the entire value chain of the product, right from the farmer to the customer. In fact, with strong government support for food essentials as a category and with our very strong tech-first thinking, we are one of the few businesses that has maintained 100% reliability with our farmers and 100% fulfillment with our customers even through the worst of the pandemic.
The Election Commission of India, while announcing the dates for polling for the assembly elections in 5 states of the country, banned physical campaigning in view of the current pandemic. While major political parties are ready to reach out virtually, some are expressing their apprehensions over the ban. The Election Commission of India has issued a directive banning physical rallies and road shows till January 15th. This order follows the announcement of assembly elections in 5 states of India that began 10th February. Different political parties are reacting differently in Uttar Pradesh, the biggest state of India to go to the polls. The ruling BJP and the Congress have already developed the infrastructure for virtual campaigning much in advance. But Bahujan Samaj Party and Samajwadi Party are lagging behind on that front. The poll schedule for the 5 states of Uttar Pradesh, Punjab, Uttarakhand, Manipur and Goa was announced by the Chief Election Commissioner on 8th January. He said, quote, "The Commission has decided that no roadshow, Padyatra, cycle, bike and vehicle rallies or any processions shall be allowed till January 15th. Similarly, no physical rallies of political parties or probable candidates or any other group related to elections shall be allowed till January 15th. The Commission shall subsequently review the situation of the pandemic and issue further instructions accordingly." End quote. Now, in the absence of on-ground rallies, social media has become an important tool for all parties and candidates who are contesting the upcoming elections. Social media will help to engage politicians directly with their voters based not just in cities but across the state. Analysts said that social media and technology can level the playing field, especially for the smaller political parties who can now amplify their reach. The political parties have welcomed the EC decision and said the constitutional body's instructions would be followed in letter and spirit. They are also prepared for the ban to extend up to the election dates and are gearing up for that eventually as well. With a strong and active presence in social media, Congress also did not appear perturbed over the EC directive. Bahujan Samaj Party spokesperson Faizan Khan said, "We welcome the EC directive and Behan Mayawati ji has asked us all to follow it." Among the prominent political parties, Akhilesh Yadav-led SP was the only one to express apprehensions over the ban on physical rallies. Akhilesh said, quote, "If we go for the virtual rallies, the Election Commission should think about those parties and their workers who do not have any infrastructure to hold virtual rallies. How will these parties hold virtual rallies without the infrastructure?" End quote. The Harvest Festival of Lohri is being celebrated in India with traditional fervour and gaiety. It also marks the beginning of the 3-day festival of Makar Sankranti in the southern states of India. Lohri, the harvest festival of North India, was celebrated on 13th January with a bonfire and folk songs that symbolize good harvest and the bountifulness of nature. Unlike most festivals in India, which witness people visiting family and friends and distributing sweets, etc., Lohri celebrations are marked by people gathering at a common place around a huge bonfire with various kinds of sweet delicacies on display for eating together. In the southern states, Makar Sankranti festivities commenced with the people celebrating Bhogi with traditional fervour and gaiety. The 3-day post-harvest festival is being celebrated across the state but predominantly in rural areas as all segments of society celebrate the festival with much pomp. President of India Ramnath Kovind in his greetings to Indians said that a majority of festivals celebrated in India depict its integral relationship with nature and agriculture. The festivals of Lohri, Makar Sankranti, Pongal, Bhogali Bihu, Uttarayan and Posh Parv mark the harvesting season of crops as the winter season ends with the ushering of the spring. People enjoy the fruits of a good harvest and celebrate these festivals, which also underline the need to preserve the environment. It is both interesting and important that such festivals are an example of India's unity in diversity. In a major case with a bearing on the humongous e-commerce and FMCG retail market in India, the Supreme Court of India has reserved its order on the Amazon Future Retail case. The Supreme Court of India reserved its orders on the future course of the multi-layered litigations between Bayani Group's Future Coupons and cash-starved Future Retails. Future Retails is managing to stay afloat with the promised Rs 25,000 crore deal with Reliance Industries on one hand and the $1 trillion multinational retail company Amazon on the other. There are lots of complications in the high-stake dispute, including orders of emergency arbitrators of Singapore restraining Future Retails from going ahead with the Rs 24,713 crore deal for the sale of retail chain assets to Reliance. The order is in contrast with the Competition Commission of India. The Supreme Court kept in abeyance its earlier permission for Amazon's Rs 1,500 crore investment in Future Coupons. A bench of Chief Justice N.V. Ramanna and Justice A.S. Bopanna and Hima Kohli heard composite arguments from top lawyers Harish Salve and Mukul Rohtgi for the Bayani Group of companies and Gopal Subramaniam and Ranjit Kumar for Amazon on various appeals filed before the Supreme Court. Amazon has a 49% stake in Future Coupons, which in turn owns 9.82% shares in Future Retail. It was Amazon's contention that the Bayani Group could not have entered into a deal with Reliance Industries without the approval of the FCPL board. SC reserved orders after hearing arguments for nearly 2 hours. Bollywood superstar Akshay Kumar is teaming up with Imran Hashmi for the film Selfie. Both stars released the film's teaser on their social media accounts. Bollywood's Khiladi Akshay Kumar always surprises his fans with his new projects. On January 12th, he threw up another surprise by announcing his new movie Selfie with star Imran Hashmi. The makers of the film also released the teaser to build up tempo and excitement. Both Akshay and Imran took to Instagram and dropped their selfies on January 12th. Sharing the clip, Akshay wrote, quote, presenting #selfie, a journey that will drive you towards loads of entertainment, laughter and emotions. Shooting begins soon, end quote. In the clip shared by Akshay, he and Imran are seen grooving on a song also named Selfie. Khiladi Kumar is all decked up in a suit and Imran is in casuals. Imran also shared the same clip and wrote, quote, extremely humbled and honored to share the driving seat with Akshay Kumar. Get ready, strike your pose because #selfie is coming to you soon. Directed by Raj Mehta, shooting begins soon, end quote. Selfie will be produced by Karan Johar, who also took to acknowledge Akshay's post. Selfie is the Hindi remake of the Malayalam hit Driving License. The film will be helmed by Prithviraj Sukumaran and Raj Mehta and bagged by Dharma Productions. That's all for this bulletin of Daily India Report.
And thank you very much, Himanshu, for that report. Well, of course, right now it's time to say goodbye from our studios as well. Until tomorrow, when we bring to you the weekend roundup, it is goodbye. Stay safe. If you're going to functions and events, do check them out first because lots have been cancelled. We know that the Pongal will now be a virtual celebration which is happening tomorrow. And there are other functions which have been postponed until further notice. So stay tuned and for further updates. Until tomorrow, it's goodbye from me.